So I want to give you a little bit of a historical background of this, because really if you just read this right here and you don't understand the story of the Exodus or the story of the Old Testament, or really the story of what's this deal with a cloud? Like, it just kind of seems like that was interesting. A cloud came down and God the Father speaks out of the cloud, and it's pretty cool. But there's a lot more going on here that we've got to have a little bit of historical context. So around 1,400 years prior to this event of Jesus' transfiguration, God's chosen people, the Israelites, the Jews, the Hebrews, whatever you want to call them, all the same thing, they were enslaved in the land of Egypt under an evil king, Pharaoh. We've all probably heard this before. We've heard about Moses delivering, leading the people out. But just bear with me on this and think really specifically what we're talking about. This is a brief history. Then God appears to Moses on a mountain in the figure of a burning bush. Moses was God's chosen servant by which he would lead his people on an exodus out of the land of slavery and into the promised land. This is why the second book of our Bible is called Exodus. It's about these slaves being freed, and God used Moses as his chosen servant to lead them out of slavery into the promised land. Now, God did many miracles or caused plagues to come in the land of Egypt, proving that he alone is God, and that when he wants his people to go free, he will have them go free. The final sign that God performed in Egypt was the sending of an angel of death who passed through the land and killed all of the firstborn children of every family. But God directed his chosen people how to be saved from this. The only way God's just judgment would pass over you was if you slaughtered a firstborn lamb without blemish or spot and spread the blood of the lamb over the doorpost of your house. Thus, by faith in God, taking shelter under the blood of the lamb. And this is how the firstborn in your house would not die. After the angel of death kills all the firstborn of the land, including Pharaoh's son, Moses leads God's people on an exodus out of slavery. So I'm kind of jumping some big stuff, but I'm just going the main themes of this is what's happened, okay? God then leads his chosen people with his very presence. We see that he leads them by a cloud in the day and a pillar of fire at night. It goes before them and leads them. And they end up going to this mountain called Mount Sinai. And there God came down and spoke to the people in a cloud. Speaks to all of the people. And pretty much right after that happens, the people are terrified. That's about the only word you can say. They are just trembling, terrified. And they say, Moses, we can't take this anymore. You talk to God. We don't want to. We can't handle this. We can't handle God coming down and talking to us. And so then God calls Moses to go up the mountain to meet with God and be the mediator between God and man. So Moses acted as the mediator to God's chosen people. Moses begged God to show him his glory. He said, God, would you just show me your glory? And I want to read this out of the book of Exodus and show you this scene. This is how it unfolds. Moses said, please show me your glory. And he said, this is God, I will make all my goodness pass before you and will proclaim before you my name, the Lord. The Hebrew is Yahweh. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. But he said, you cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live. And the Lord said, behold, there is a place by me where you shall stand on the rock. And while my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back. The literal of the Hebrew is saying, you will see where I just was. Almost like the shadow of me. I'm leaving, and you kind of see where I just was, where I was. But my face shall not be seen. When God tells Moses that no one can see my face and live, he's saying there's an infinite gap between sinful humanity and me as holy, righteous, perfect God. There's this gap. You can't just come into my presence and see me. No one who sees my face shall live. He's saying your sin has separated you in such a way that you can't even take my reality. If you were to behold my face, if you were to behold my raw, holy, glorious presence, it would destroy you. This is what he's saying to Moses. He's saying, but what's good enough is that I will show you where I just was. And that was good enough to make Moses' face really glow. And that's not just a figure of speech. Then Moses talks with God and receives the 10 Commandments for the second time. The first time he went down the mountain and they were worshiping idols and he breaks them. Then he goes back up and he's talking with God. He receives the 10 Commandments again, writes them down, comes off the mountain and doesn't probably really know what's going on. And the people are, Moses, your face is glowing. And it's not like we say someone that's pregnant is glowing. McLean was asking me that the other day. She's saying, people are telling me that you're supposed to like glow in pregnancy, but I feel really ugly. Which is totally not true, and I confirmed that to her. But this is not like you're glowing. This was a literal, Moses' face was glowing. It was reflecting the glory of God. He was speaking with God. And so he comes down and he's reflecting this. It's as if God's raw presence is a fire and Moses is a stick that's been near the fire. And even when you take the stick out of the fire, if you follow me on this, it's still glowing with the fire. It's not the fire in itself, but it's burning. And you see, that stick has been in the fire. God's the fire. We are sticks that reflect the glory of the fire. So later, God gives the leaders of Israel instructions on how to build his temple. And he will come and his immediate presence will dwell inside of the temple. Now this started as a tent. Really, the word is tabernacle, but this was a place that God came and he showed them how to do this. And eventually, the temple in Jerusalem was built by Solomon, and God's presence was in the holiest place of this temple that man could only go in it one time a year, and it was the high priest after he had done tons and tons of rituals. One day a year, he could go into the presence of God and offer sacrifices for the sin of God's people. And if he was defiled in any way, if he had even a blemish on his clothes or anything, he would drop dead immediately because, as God said, no one can see me and live. No one can behold my raw presence. So this is kind of the background that we see that God even dwells in the Holy of Holies in the temple and a cloud over the mercy seat. That this is a theme throughout the Old Testament of the Bible, that God's immediate raw presence is usually beheld in a cloud or a pillar of fire at night. And as he talks to Moses in a burning bush, it's a burning bush that doesn't really burn. This is a good background that we need to really understand what's going on here with Jesus' transfiguration. So let's move to the text now. You guys tracking with everything that we're going through? We've heard this probably our whole life. I want to make sure that this is explicit for all of us, though, that we understand the background and we understand God's glory. We understand that we can't come into the presence of God as we are. It's not possible. It would destroy us. Just as the high priest couldn't enter the Holy of Holies unless he was perfectly pure and clean and repentant and all of that, so we can't. We can't see his face and live.